Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We'll be engaging in stimulating conversations every week.
We want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding.
These conversations and the associated language can be triggering.
Listen at your own discretion.
But please reach out if we need to be doing something better.
So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome. This is our first return of Mr. Chazz.
Hey, hello, I'm back.
Welcome back, Chazz. How have you been, man?
I've been doing pretty good. I can't complain. I've been practicing what I've been preaching. I've been learning some new stuff myself, and I've just been sharing it with the world. So I'm in a good place.
I'm really glad you said that walking the walk is the hardest part. Talking's pretty easy.
Very much so.
And I'm glad to hear that you've been growing and, feel like you're in a great place in life. That's what matters. On our last episode, we had a lot of great information and everything that you provided us. But just in case this is the first time somebody is hearing us speak to you and they haven't heard episode 113, can you tell us a little bit about you and kind of what you're about?
This time I am going to give the brief version. I think last time I gave maybe the medium version, but I started off as a Montessori teacher, became an educational specialist where my role was to go to different schools and support kids and teachers and families, and really worked with a lot of the more challenging behaviors that, other teachers had a hard time managing. During the pandemic, I started to share all of kind of the knowledge and all the things I've learned along my journey of making mistakes and just trying to figure it out and learning and reflecting. And that also led me to a framework called conscious discipline, which is something that I practice today and would like to tell you a little bit more about today, because it's something that I believe will make the world a better place on a large scale level, but even for the individual, will give you the inner peace that you need to live a fulfilling, enjoyable, helpful life that minimizes harm.
Yes. We've already said compassion is the way, so harm reduction is number one.
Yeah.
I like that you talk about breaking generational cycles of trauma, because most of us are jacked up from our childhood, so you're trying to solve the problem at the root, which is a very efficient way of going about it.
Yeah. And, jacked up people teach or grow more jacked up people, which teach more jacked up people. And then we all just learn these kind of jacked up habits. And it's hard for us to kind of break out of that cycle, because it's like, we don't have any other examples. And even if we do, like, hey, I don't want to do this jacked up thing that I was raised with, then that's when the real work begins. It's a great place to be. Celebrate that you've gotten to the point of like, hey, I want to do something different. But then it's like, well, what else do I do? How else do I handle this situation? How else do I navigate the world when it doesn't go my way? If I'm not going to use aggression or passivity or passive aggression. And, that's one of the things that I came here to talk about today, of what do you do instead of using aggression or passiveness or passive aggression. And one of the big skills in conscious discipline is assertiveness, which is what you do instead. But a lot of people might be hearing that and like, well, I don't even know what do you really mean by assertiveness? Yeah. But that's just one of the many ways that you can navigate life in a healthier way.
Whenever you say assertiveness, my mind immediately jumps back to this story Tim told us a while ago. Would you like to kind of dissect this and give us an after action or hot wash on it?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Pretty recently, Tim asked one of his people to go run traffic, and he's an MP, so, they have to pull people over who are doing dumb stuff. And Tim was working with another customer, which is why he asked this young sailor to go run traffic control. And they blew up. They said, of course I'm going to effing do this. You're my boss. What do you think? And Tim was kind of shocked and had that immediate hindbrain reaction of like, I need to kill this person. But he took a breath, composed himself like you talked about in our last episode, and followed the sailor outside and said, "Excuse me, what in the world is going on? Like, traffic's not that big of a deal. You must be going through something because I'm just asking you to do your job. I respect you. I expect you to respect me. What is happening?" So, as a professional, can you dig that apart for Tim, because you're the one who knows conscious discipline more better than us? Yeah.
Yeah, I will definitely take it apart. And I will say, in terms of conscious discipline, I heard a couple skills that Tim used in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're here talking about assertiveness, but really all the skills, and it's 7 skills of conscious discipline, they all really intertwine and you use them interchangeably. So while I'm going to be focusing on assertiveness today, you're going to hear me talk about some other skills. And so I heard not only did he use composure, right? Being able to kind of take a breath, pause, kind of regulate, and kind of be the person that he wanted to be in that moment, as opposed to just letting his emotions get the best of him and just reacting with his emotions. So composure was one. Assertiveness was another one, to kind of like setting limits and saying like, hey, that wasn't like okay with me. Like what's going on? Like trying to really move toward the solution.
Yeah.
And then also I heard positive intent, really seeing the best in others, right? When he said, like this is something must be going on, right? You're instead of just labeling the person as a bad person, an asshole, and just saying what's wrong with you, really seeing the best. And like, hey, something must have happened. Like I'm trying to understand you. And that really helps when we see the best in others.
Yeah.
It really brings out the best in others. Right. And so that really opens it for the other person to say, hey, you know what? Like something did happen. I'm having an off day, or I got triggered by something else, or something, something's going on at home, or I haven't eaten today, whatever it is. But assertiveness is really about setting limits respectfully, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being heard. And so, in this situation, when he's saying, hey, like pretty much saying, hey, the way that you were talking to me wasn't okay, but like what's going on? Let's move toward a solution. That is assertiveness. Now, what he could have done, what we have a tendency to do, and what this other person actually did was he went straight to aggression, right? Tim told him to do something. And instead of, the person using, the skills of a positive intent, seeing the best in Tim, like, hey, there must be a reason why you asked me to do this, and saying like, hey, and maybe he perceived Tim to say in a way that was maybe aggressive, a way that rubbed him the wrong way. He could have at that moment, instead of going to aggression, could have said, hey, I'm not okay when you speak to me, when you yell at me, when you raise your voice at me. Can you please speak in a calmer tone? And so that we can have a conversation, right? He could have said that, but he went to aggression, right? This other person went to aggression. And so now Tim has a choice. He could go react with aggression and say, hey, you're not going to talk to me this way. And then we're just going to be two people who are probably going to get in a fist fight at some point, or we're not going to be able to move towards the actual solving of the problem, actual understanding.
Problem plus problem does not equal solution.
Say that again?
2 wrongs don't make a right.
Right. And so like Tim responding or reacting with aggression, or Tim reacting with passivity and not saying anything and not doing anything, doesn't move anyone closer towards the goal, right? And passive aggression doesn't help either, right? If Tim would have said like, someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed today.
Someone's got a case of the Mondays.
Who peed in your Cheerios this morning?
Right. That doesn't really move us towards problem solving and a solution to where we can actually collaborate and work together so that both people's needs can be met and whatever needs to happen can happen.
Anytime I've ever mentioned this story, I've never even considered the fact that I might have actually said something in an aggressive manner to him, or I said it in a way that could be perceived as aggressive. And I am human, and I am at fault for making mistakes and everything. Sometimes I get into a work mode, and when I'm busy in work mode, it's work. I have information, it needs put out, and I don't care about how I say it. It's just, it needs to be said, it needs to be done, right? And I'm glad you said that, because I always thought that I was just like, hey man, can you go and blah, 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 blah. But I might have just been like, hey, get out on the road. It never even occurred to me. So I'm kind of glad that you were able to help me break that portion down too.
just because he didn't receive what you said in a way that where, it might not have just been the way you communicated it. It might have just been he was in a state in that moment. And so he's going to see the world through his emotional state or survival state, right? And so it's not always, you may have said it in a way that wasn't that people generally wouldn't consider rude, but he just might have been in a reactive state in that moment. And it just might have been more helpful for you to kind of help him and to collaborate and work together. You may have had to use some other skills like positive intent, like, hey, something happened. Like normally this isn't how we would normally communicate what's going on, which might help him hear you better, but you're not always going to communicate like that 100% of the time. And so, although that is, if someone is reacting in an emotional state, that kind of for kids, we will call it misbehavior, or, they're throwing a temper tantrum, but we throw our adult temper tantrums too. And that is a sign, that is a signal for you to kind of take a step back. If you want to collaborate with this person, if you want to work with this person, if you want to care for this person, that is a sign for you to kind of like pause and take a step back, make sure that you're composed, and maybe try to maybe connect and try to reach some kind of understanding and try to maybe see the world from his view, really see that misbehavior or that temper tantrum as communication, right? Or communicating, I'm overwhelmed right now, I'm frustrated right now, I don't like the way that you spoke to me. Something's going on at home, but it's all we communicate what's going on internally with our body language, with our tone, and with our words. And so if someone is throwing a temper tantrum, you can see that as that person just being an asshole, or you can see it as their nervous system communicating to you, and you can choose to ignore it or attack it, or you can choose to understand it and guide them. And really, that is 100% your choice.
Honestly, I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, because taking it and being like, the way this person is reacting, it is their nervous system, like you said, trying to communicate with me. That is incredible. And I feel like that could change my perspective on dealing with possibly, aggressive or upset or angry or whatever it may be individuals. One big thing too is whenever I responded and decided to attempt to de-escalate the situation with this individual, I'm so glad that I had been working on trying to keep more of a calm composure and being able to confront without, I guess, coming off as an asshole or being too assertive or I'm the boss, you listen to me. No, we're two human beings. We got to talk. And we talk about this a little bit in the leadership episode too, but in the military, we kind of get whole caught up in the idea well, we're in the military and I outrank you, so you're going to listen to me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Those are those excuses that we tell ourselves. So when we respond in a emotional state, we can justify it to ourselves,
One thing that I kind of realized, if I look back, the only times I've been mean has been when I'm overloaded. I don't think I've ever been relaxed and been an asshole. So if someone's being an asshole, I probably need to help bring that person down back into their forebrain.
Right. Hey, I want to emphasize that that's 100% a choice. That's 100% a choice that you have, right? You're not, I don't think it's everyone's responsibility to tend to everyone's nervous system. Assertiveness, composure go hand in hand, but also choices go really hand in hand with assertiveness. And whenever I'm teaching children the skill of assertiveness, and so it often goes, the skill of choice is always connected with it. And it's also connected even with our adult assertiveness. And so I'm going to kind of give a few examples in this episode of what it looks like with a toddler, what it looks like with an adult. I actually saw a really good video. I don't know if you guys saw the video. It was on TikTok about someone giving tips at Chipotle. They're being very assertive. And so I'm going to kind of come back to that. But first, let me talk about what it looks like for a toddler. And a toddler, I'm really kind of thinking about 2-year-olds. Right now, I'm currently working with 2-year-olds, so I'm doing this all the time. So I'm going to give you some examples or an example. A toddler has a tendency, and anyone who's been around young children know that like they have a tendency to just grab toys, right? And just
Yeah.
kind of take toys and just kind of grab from each other, hit, bite, whatever to get what they want, right? They're using their survival skills to get what they want. That is kind of the first part of the brain that is developed. So it makes sense that toddlers are using that skill to get what they want, to try to make the world go their way, right? And I want to teach them a healthier way, to a more pro-social way to reach their goals and get what they want. You can't see me, but I'm kind of using like a claw hand. That's how toddlers typically try to get their toys. They kind of like claw, right? And what I do is I teach them to kind of turn their hand over, palm facing up the ceiling, and to say, turn, please. Because remember, toddlers don't have a lot of words. They may be able to say like one or two words. So turn, please, is all that they can really get out. And whenever you're teaching a skill, you want to meet the person with where they're at. You only got two words. I'm going to give you 2 words to say and help you, turn your hand over and say, turn, please, to ask for a toy. If they're trying to take a toy, say turn. And I'll say, turn, please. I'll say, turn, please. And a lot of times the other child will give the child a turn. And then I celebrate it and I say, look, you gave them a turn. You did it. I'll use my skill of encouragement, another conscious discipline skill. And say, look, you did it. You gave them a turn so they could play with it too. That was helpful. I may connect with them and celebrate just to reinforce the idea that taking turns is a hard, but it is a worthy thing to do. And just like in the real world, when you have something, you have the choice of whether to, like let's say you have $1 billion. You have the choice to give that to charity. You don't have to. You have the choice to. Now, if you do, you're going to probably be celebrated and people are going to celebrate you and probably going to help build a relationship with a lot of people. And that's the reality. And so like in this moment, they give a turn. If they choose to give a turn, I'll celebrate that. I'll connect with them, kind of reinforce that behavior. But there's other times where children still, they don't want to give a turn, right? They put their shoulder up to the ear like this, and they're like, mine. They don't want to give a turn. And they have the choice not to give a turn. Just because you're assertive doesn't mean that you're always going to get exactly what you want the way you want it, right? And so and then I go to the skill of choices and say, okay, well, it seems like they're not ready to give a turn yet. You can play with this truck over there or that truck over there, right? And I try to give them 2 positive choices. A lot of times as adults, I gave them choices, but it's like, you can play with this toy or you can get over it, or you can be quiet or you can go to timeout. That's not a choice. It's not a choice. That's manipulation. That's coercion. Give them 2 real, like authentic choices, right? And what this also does, it gives the child, the person, a sense of like, oh, I actually have a choice, a genuine, like, I have power in this situation. And so when they feel like they actually have power in this situation, they don't feel powerless. That's regulating in itself, and they're going to be more likely to actually make those choices, right? And so that's what I do. Now, there's one other skill. Now, there are going to be some times where the child says, no, I don't want any of those choices, even if you do 2 positive choices. And then that's when I use, we practice the skill of empathy. And I just empathize with how hard it is for them to, want something and not be able to get it. And they're like, I'll be there. I'm here for you. I'm here for you, right? I'm not going to shame you for crying about not getting what you wanted, because it's hard when you really want something and you don't get. We've all been in that position. Maybe it's been a promotion. Maybe it's been a job. Maybe it's been someone you want to go on a date with. Maybe it's all these things. And what we want to do is not, just overpower the other person, but just teach them to really sit in those feelings and manage those feelings and process those feelings. And young children can't really do that on their own. They need another person, what we call it co-regulation. And the way that children learn to self-regulate is by having lots of experiences in a healthy adult relationship with co-regulation. So that's kind of the process of teaching assertive communication, but all these other skills go along with it. And that's how from very young, you can teach a child to use assertive communication as opposed to going to aggression when they're wanting something.
One thing that I love that you pointed out that I've noticed is helpful for people of all ages. specific versus vague on choices. Instead of saying you can do whatever you want or carry on smartly, as we would say in the military.
Yeah, right.
If I'm sorry that I'm going to bring up suicide, but it's been touching my life a lot lately, so that's the medium I'm going to express this through.
Yeah.
If one of your friends experiences someone hurting themselves or taking their own life, you shouldn't say, I'm here if you need anything. Because they need everything right now. Are you serious? You should say, if you live nearby them, you could say, do you need me to bring you a coffee? Do you need me to make dinner for you? Should I do your laundry? Or me living in Virginia Beach and most of my friends are at least 3 hours away, I say, hey, if you need a place to stay, we have a spare room. We're here. So I really love that you said you have to be specific. You can't just say, you can either get over playing with the toy or I'm going to thrash you. You shouldn't do that. You should give real, tangible options. Not, how can I make you feel better? Because whenever somebody's person just killed themselves, there's no possible way to make them feel better.
Yeah.
So that's not a realistic thing to offer. A realistic thing to offer is, do you need hot cocoa? Do you need coffee? Do you need me to come spend time with you?
I have definitely done that before, where somebody's going through a hard time and I don't give them a specific thing. I
Me
will
too.
tell them, I'm here if you need anything, right? I've used that phrase before. I don't think it's a wrong thing to do. And I have had people reach out and be like, yes, I need something right now. I need this, that, or the third. And I'm going to accommodate because obviously I love and care about this person. And I offered, if you need anything, let me know. They needed something, they let me know, and I'm going to accommodate. But I do think moving forward, if God forbid I do have a friend who is going through a hard time, I will provide specific options for them, specific choices for them. So this way it can kind of narrow it down a little bit, because I've been hearing something similar to that where somebody was like, they'll hit up a friend who's going through a hard time and be like, hey, I'm on my way to the grocery store. Do you want a gallon of milk? And that's incredible. And I want to be that person. I want to be that friend to the people that I love and care about.
You know what that also does too, when you're specific about like those, choices of like of specific ways to help? Two things. One, it makes it more likely the person will, if it's something that's helpful to them, that they'll say yes to it, because what you focus on, kind of you're going to get more of. And so like maybe they didn't really think about like someone going grocery shopping for them, but now they're thinking about like, actually that would be very helpful. Or they think about it and they say, no, actually I need this, or I don't want that because such and such is going on. So you offer the choices and then you listen with an empathetic ear. And you don't just like, well, no, that's not what you need, but you just really listen to what they're trying to tell you and what they're trying to communicate, because they might reject your choices, but they'll be more likely to give you some helpful information for you to be able to help them. And then maybe you come back with some different choices. Like, oh, well, you really just, if you need someone to talk to, then, I get off work every day at 3 p.m., and I'm available from 3 to 5. And, if you don't call me, I'll text you by, whatever it is, right? Yeah, just being specific in general can be helpful in so many different situations. And so that actually brings me to my Chipotle, to the Chipotle one. So here's a video.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
That went viral. So let me ask you guys, let me start off with a question. Have you ever been to Chipotle and you felt like they've given you kind of inconsistent amounts of protein in your bowl or on your burrito?
I would say yes. I feel like I've gotten less and more different times I've gone there.
Right. Just not consistent, right? And so there was someone who created a video who they were like, this is a spoon, right? And they kind of show like the spoon that they use. And pretty much what they said is that when it's low, you're going to get an inconsistent amount on that spoon. And I mean, there's also, and he also said because of maybe the mood, but like the point is you can get an inconsistent amount, you get a scoop from it, and it might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less, right? And what he says is, look, what we want as customers, what is not okay with us is the inconsistent amounts of the protein, right? And so what would be helpful is use a measuring cup so that we get the same amount. And you might be trying to cut down on the amount that you're giving us, and that's fine. You have that choice to do that, but just let us know up front and maybe use a smaller measuring cup, right? And so that we can make an informed decision about where we go eat. And so he's communicating what is not okay, which is, hey, the inconsistent amounts of protein, not okay with us, right? And he's offering a solution. This is the way we'd like to be treated. Use a measuring cup, right? And so the way that I would, kind of teach for a young child what that sounds is like, I don't like it when you give us inconsistent amounts of protein in our bowls. Please use a measuring cup to give us a consistent amount. That's pretty much, now he did a whole 3-minute little TikTok video, pretty much breaking it down, right? And so he's like, he's like being a lawyer with it and kind of doing exhibit A, exhibit B, right? And so that's maybe a little bit more adult assertiveness. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a little bit of passive aggression that was thrown in there. But I think that was a little bit for the views. But largely, he's using assertive communication. And I thought it was very well done. Now, this is also where the skill of choices comes in. He does a follow-up video. And these skills are very powerful. Before I tell you about the follow-up video, these skills are very powerful. And if you don't have, realistically, you could learn these skills. And if you don't have good intentions, you could cause harm. And that's what the powers are all about. There's this, I'm telling you about the skills right now, but the powers, like the power of love, the power of intention, that kind of go along with these skills are also important so that you're using these skills for good, right? In my personal opinion, I think that this is for good. Everyone getting consistent amount in their Chipotle order. But what he says is, what he encourages people to do, if you feel like you're getting an inconsistent amount with the spoon and they're making your order and you ask for more and they say, we're going to have to charge you double to give you what you expect to be the amount that you're owed, then you can just walk out. And what's going to happen there is that Chipotle is going to lose money if people are walking out, if people are deciding, hey, this isn't the way we want to be treated. And we're communicating what you can do, how we'd like to be treated. Use measuring cups so we get a consistent amount. And if you don't do it, I'm going to make the choice to not give business. I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to ask for, hey, I want the right amount. And if you don't give me the right amount, I'm going to make a choice. And then you also have a choice of, you could do the measuring cup or you can continue to use the spoon. And they might be good with the spoon. And they might say hey, the measuring cup, we don't want to spend $1 million to put measuring cups in our company. And so we're not going to do that. And that's fine. That's their choice, right? Everyone has a choice in this, but no one is necessarily attacking one person or the other, but everyone's making choices based off of what they perceive to be okay or justice or injustice. And that's another thing that assertiveness does. It helps you stand up for yourself. It helps you address oppression or perceived injustice. Maybe Chipotle is not doing anything wrong. And maybe Chipotle comes out with a statement that says, hey, this is what we're going to do. Do you accept it or not? But this is the way that it plays out in kind of the adult, real corporate business world as well. So it's not just things that we teach, cutesy things that we can teach kids for them to learn to stop hitting each other. It's also ways that we can use to navigate the world in a way where we're not attacking others.
One thing that I really want to say right now, Chazz, I greatly respect the work you do, right? I think that you are doing incredible work in the world. And I also feel a certain amount of I wouldn't call it pity, but I'm just going to say pity, right? The things you have to teach adults, the skills, the traumas that you're able to teach them and get them through. You're talking about people who have been stuck in an echo chamber growing up through their generation, through their families and everything, and learning these things.
Generational traumas and unlearning things.
Yeah, these are terms that people like to use nowadays, like echo chamber and generational trauma. But just thinking about trying to teach a skill and breaking it down like that to an adult who has experienced that their whole life, I have so much respect for your work, and I have even greater respect for it. Like, just thinking about what you have to go through if you were to take, because you primarily work with children, but that doesn't mean that you don't also help adults. Teaching children is one thing, right? Like, that's already difficult, and it's incredible what you're doing. But breaking the bad habits off of these adults and things, and just listening to you talk about these skills, oh my God, I got so much respect for you, man. So much.
Well, at this point in my career, I'm probably working more with adults than I am working with kids.
Most of your viewers are not too.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And you know, like, I've been on a journey myself, right? And so, like, you know, I'm talking about assertiveness and like assertive communication, not going to aggression, right? And the example of, like, I just kind of gave with Chipotle, like, you know, some people may get upset and have, what people often do is they take out their aggression maybe on the employees, right? And they yell at the employees and they yell at them, and, you know, they're just trying to do their job, or, you know, whatever, or God forbid, like, people, it gets really escalated and people are attacking the store, you know, things like that. And while I've never broke into like a store or like rioted before, I do know what it's like to get aggressive, and even with a child, right? Especially working with children. And on my journey, I remember a time where, when I was working in a Montessori group, and I had like, I think 20, probably like 28 kids in the class. And there was a child who had a little bit of a developmental delay, and they were hurting people. And I think we were coming to the carpet and kind of like bulldozed over a bunch of kids. And, you know, I tried to talk to him about it, and he turned around and kind of like smiled at me while like this other child was crying. And the important part of composure is learning what your triggers are. And I now am aware that my trigger is when a child hurts another child, and I perceive them to have no remorse for what they did.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I wasn't as aware of my trigger. And so what happened was, when he like turned around and smiled and I didn't really perceive him to have any remorse, I went to aggression, because it was like this, like, you need to like know what you're doing is bad, and you need to, you know, feel sorry for what you did, and you're not going to get it if, you know, I'm not yelling at you. And there was a lot of finger wagging. There's a lot of really putting my uncomfortable emotions on this child, and just taking it out on this child really is what I was doing, as opposed to recognizing my trigger and regulating that. And then maybe using assertive communication, or teaching him how to get to the carpet or whatever it was. I went to aggression and I yelled at him. And I was definitely getting out my aggression on this child. And what happened is, he stopped what he was doing, right? He wasn't hurting the child anymore. In that moment, he froze, and the room was quiet. And in that moment, I got what I wanted. I got the obedience that I wanted. But then I noticed that me putting that aggression, that frustration, that anger out on the child, it didn't just dissipate into air. That child took onto it, and not just that child, but really the children in the room who watched me berate that child really kind of absorbed that anger and that frustration. And I tell you, that day the emotional climate was so negative, and there was so much aggression in that room in general for the rest of that day. And I probably had to write more accident reports than I ever had to write. And not only did it impact the children in that room, it also impacted my co-teacher who was watching me, right? Who was expecting me to kind of lead, and who's really learning a lot, you know, from me. She started going quicker to aggression with things that were happening in the classroom, more than she typically would on other days when I was able to get back to my composure, be composed. And that was one big lesson in that, is I learned my trigger. I had to like really kind of reflect and like, why did I get so angry and go to aggression? That was one. I think there's some childhood stuff there that like I had to unpack a little bit where that trigger came from. Two, after that kind of reflection, I went to problem solving. Okay, like what can I do next time? And I texted my co-teacher. I was like, tomorrow we can't do it. Like, did you see what happened today? Was it just me who recognized what was like? And she was like, no, like it was crazy. And okay, so tomorrow when we start getting to that point of escalation, we're gonna tag each other and we're gonna pause. We're gonna take a breath. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to the corner of the room and I'm gonna count to 10 while I breathe. And if you do what you need to do, and if at any point we came up with a game plan of what we're gonna do next time. So we didn't go to aggression, right? And the next day, I went into the classroom and I apologized to the kids for what I did because I want to model like, hey, like I'm gonna take accountability for my actions, right? We're always wanting kids to take accountability for their action. Say sorry for what you did, right? Instead of us forcing children to give an inauthentic apology, which I'd say if you're forcing them to say sorry, is it really an apology? I'd say no. The more powerful way is to teach it in the moment and through modeling, right? And we're not above making mistakes and apologizing for it. So as much like, thank you, Tim, for all of that, like, the kudos and everything. But it really comes from my ability to teach adults really comes from me going on that same journey and struggling and making mistakes. And so I am able to have genuine empathy for people who are not there yet, who are different parts of their journey. I have a lot of empathy for that. So thanks, Tim, but we're all here learning together.
I'm going to talk about Chick-fil-A for just a second before we're like totally past it.
Chick-fil-A or Chipotle?
If you're at the drive-thru and you're having a rough day and that scoop is going to change your life, the technology you have is saying, hey man, I'm having a rough day. Can you make sure I get a full scoop on that? Like that's compassionate communication in my personal opinion. So that's my recommendation for the technology that most of us have right now. I love that you said you can learn these lessons for good or evil, because that's one of how the pickup artist stuff and the negging is so cringe. It's because you should learn about gaslighting and emotional manipulation and stuff to avoid it, not to embrace it. If you meditate on it, that stuff is bad karma.
So bad.
Instead, read Attached, the book I talked about in episode 1 with Pookie, to learn about different attachment styles so you can have a healthy attachment style and move into a healthy relationship. You shouldn't be learning how to neg somebody so you can pick up chicks and slam. Like if all you want to do is bone, just upfront healthy communication. You see a hot chick at the club, be like, hey man, I'm about that action. What's up? And if they like your energy, they're going to be for it. Sorry, but trust me. And then Chazz, again, you showed us about what you said in season 1, that what we bring is purely additive. You as the teacher, every single second, your co-teacher and your students were learning from you.
Yeah.
When you brought aggression into your teaching, they learned aggression. And then you, having failed to plan, you had planned to fail. You failed because you and your co-teacher didn't say, hey man, if we get frustrated, what are we going to do? You didn't have that PPR. But then as soon as you came up with a PPR, and then you were honest with yourself and you were apologizing and changing your behavior, is how you change yourself. So you can't just apologize like we've done to the Native Americans. You actually have to change what reality looks like. So I'm glad that you changed what reality looked like for yourself and 29 other people. That day changed 30 lives. Can you imagine how far those ripples are going to be? And that was before you got TikTok famous, before you had, hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views or whatever. So I understand what you're doing is very hard, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing. But more than anything, I want to appreciate you for being on Team Free Will and Team Human and being the fulcrum that changes the timeline. Tim and I are trying to become fulcrums, and it's not super comfortable. I'll tell you that, man.
Yeah.
Being under the lever isn't great, but even if you can just be a positive force, you don't have to be a fulcrum. as long as you're shoving us towards utopia instead of letting us trend towards dystopia,
Mm.
keep it up. And if you have a rough day, sit and reflect. And if you're the cause for your rough day, then you should find a way to change your behavior to change your future, like Chazz did.
You know what? I want to piggyback off that, like, because there's
Chief.
there's that's his thing.
It's a military joke.
Yeah,
That was
sorry,
the
sorry.
piggyback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a military thing.
I want to add to this.
Yep.
You know, there's this pivotal moment that we are constantly in, especially when you're, you know, in charge of guiding children, but I mean, just navigating the world in general, where it's like in that moment where I got to aggression and I took it out on, you know, the child, I could have just justified it and just been like, hey, well, that he hurt someone else. If he doesn't want to get yelled at, he needs to just, you know, he needs to be more careful or needs to not hurt people. And kind of I could just justify my behavior and just blame the other person for the actions that I took and say, it's not my fault. You made me yell at you. You made me spank you. You made me abuse you. You made me gaslight you. You made me do whatever it is. Or we can take responsibility for our actions and what we chose to do and learn how we can improve ourselves, change ourselves so that we can make decisions that are aligned with our values and we can stay aligned with our values even when the world doesn't go our way. And that is a huge, like that belief system right there, because people automatically go to blaming everyone else and blaming the world, right? And so if you can get out of that and be like, well, you know, I can't change everyone else. I'm not in control of everyone else's thoughts, feelings, and actions, but I am in control of my own thoughts, feelings, and actions. And if I can be in control of that, then my influence and my impact can be huge and intentional.
I really hope that people are listening and hearing what you're saying, because one of the big things that we talk about in our opener is we want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding. And that comes with compassion and also realizing that you can't change other people and you can't blame them for how you act. That nails it down, you know, exactly what we want to say in our platform.
So, Buddha, you do realize that in your earlier teachings in your life as Siddhartha, you said that reality is composed of the wisdom drop and the compassion drop. So you achieved wisdom through meditation, and then you have excelled towards creating nirvana by being compassionate. Because if you're compassionate but you're not wise, your compassion doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You took your meditation, you allowed that to enlighten you, and then you used that to heal the world. So thank you for doing that, Chazz.
Well, thank you for being a part of it too, because y'all are doing it as well. Y'all are doing the work too. Y'all are doing the self-reflection and the learning. And I mean, that's really, you know, I said in the first episode of my number one thing that I always say is avoid being a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. And, you know, it's clear just from, this is probably maybe like my fourth conversation with you, second one on the podcast. And it's so clear that you guys are both so open to just learning and reflecting and practicing. And I mean, that's really what the work is, because it's, you know, we're going to do things, we're going to cause harm. The reality is different parts in our, like, we're going to cause harm. We're going to get in an emotional state and look at the world as me versus you. We're going to probably be an asshole sometimes. And, you know, it's not about being perfect and never make a mistake and never, but it's about recognizing when that does happen. And the very best you can do is recognize it at the moment and change course in the moment and kind of just bring yourself back on the path in the moment. That's the very best thing you do. It takes a lot of practice to do that. And no one does it 100% of the time. But to even be able to say, I didn't bring myself back. I didn't, bring myself back to consciousness and my actions didn't align with my values. And this is what I'm going to do next time. Like, I think that is the most powerful skill and mindset to have. And I think through that skill, you can kind of learn all the other skills. Now you're going to learn it. It's going to be, the learning process is clunky. It's messy. It's going to be full of emotions, but really seeing those mistakes as opportunities for learning is just so important and paramount to this ongoing growth. And then once you learn kind of all these skills and you kind of gain more of that inner peace, it's really, the way that I see it is really, you're just sharing that inner peace with others outwardly. Mm-hmm. And it starts to create outward peace, whether it's in your personal relationship, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in a household, whether it's in an organization, whether it's in the government. And my hope is that you individuals out there just are listening. You learn more about conscious discipline. You learn more about all these kind of skills. You build more inner peace so you can share it outwardly. And as that inner peace or that light begins to spread, it just spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads until there's no other option but world peace.
I love that.
I do too.
Unfortunately, we're coming up on our time limit, but I do want to say, Chazz, is there anything you want to push specifically before we run our closer? Or do you just trust in the fact that we're going to have you linked in our show notes and people know how to find Mr. Chazz?
Yeah, I'll just say follow me, especially this is probably a lot of people first time hearing me or maybe second time from the other podcast. So just follow me on social media. And, if you're interested in more resources, I can definitely give you resources tailored to your situation, but just start following me on social media. And I think that we can change lives together. There's a lot of people who follow me. I get comments all the time that say, I don't even have kids, but I follow you because this helps heal my childhood. This helps me just better with my relationships. And maybe one day I might have a kid and I want to start learning all this stuff now. So just follow me on social media. I got podcasts, Mr. Chazz Leadership, Parenting and Teaching Podcast. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the things. And I'll see you on the internet.
Thank you for joining us, Chazz.
And thank all of you for joining us.
This has been Aaron.
And Tim with
Mr. Chazz.
A huge thank you to Hyland Markle for the original music.
Send this episode to whoever popped into your head while listening.
Comment below with what you want to hear us talk about next week.
And tag somebody we should bring on the podcast.
All pertinent links can be found in the episode description.
Be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace.
Bye, y'all.